Take bags. Why not yourself?
Call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob,
Here.
Cindy,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Here.
Eric,
Excused.
Kurt.
Here. Okay, we have 6 assembly members present this evening. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, it's time for approval of minutes from past meetings. There's 3 different meetings, regular meeting minutes from April 3rd, Board of Equalization meetings from April 3rd, and May 1st regular meeting minutes. If there's no changes, we could approve all of those at once, if that's the will of the Assembly.
So move. Second.
Okay, we'll approve those minutes as presented to us. Next item on the agenda is amendment and approval of meeting agenda tonight. So is there any amendments, or will we proceed with the meeting or the agenda as presented? Need a motion?
I move to approve the meeting agenda.
Second. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, one change I would like to mention, though, on the agenda tonight, under discussion items, we have Mark Scheer was going to give a little presentation, and without any objection from the Assembly, we can move him up to the first person on views related to items on today's agenda, and that way, if he gets bored, he could leave the meeting. So, anyway, we'll keep moving forward here. Public hearings. There's a public hearing tonight on Ordinance 2017-07, and that's an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adopting the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. I would entertain a motion, or is there anybody here that would like to participate in that public hearing on the budget? Okay, seeing none, that public hearing is closed. Next item, B, under public hearings, there's a public hearing on Ordinance 2017-08. And this is an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the fiscal year 2017 budget for known changes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing? Seeing nobody raising their hand, public hearings are closed. Bid awards, item 6 on the agenda. There's no nothing listed there, no bids to award. And so now we're to visitors' views related to today's agenda. So, Mark, if you'd like to come up, well, he's already here. Thank you.
Mayor and Assembly, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Mark Scheer. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Alaska Fishery Development Foundation. I also sit on the Southeast Conference and the Sitka Chamber of Commerce. I'm an attorney by trade, but I've been in the seafood industry for about 30 years in one way or another. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about the Alaska Mariculture Task Force and the Mariculture Initiative. The Alaska Fishery Development Foundation is a foundation that was by its name for developing fisheries, and we've done lots of different things. About 4 years ago, we decided, or 3 years ago, we decided to focus on mariculture development in Alaska as a focal point of what we're trying to do. Out of that came the Alaska Mariculture Initiative. Many of you know Julie Decker, who is our executive director. She has been tirelessly working to develop this industry in Alaska for a number of years. And one of the things that came out of that effort was the Mariculture Task Force, which was created by the governor in March of last year. The task force is an agency and industry individuals that are to make recommendations about how to take this existing industry, which in past years there's about 30 small farms in Alaska. Last year they produced for the first time more than $1 million in revenue, which is a start. The Mariculture Initiative envisioned creating an industry that produced $1 billion in revenue, and hopefully in the next 30 years. we can do that. There's been a lot of progress in that. The recommendations are a whole series of different things, but one of the things that I wanted to emphasize here tonight is that this is an industry that is additive to what's already here. Let's see if we can. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but we don't need to go. Is that working? But it's all right. That's all right.
Right here.
Sorry. Should we go ahead? So I think a couple of things that are kind of fundamental to talk about here. What is mariculture and what is it not? Hey, now I'm in lights. So mariculture is not finfish farming. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is farming kelp. The first commercial harvests of kelp in Alaska are occurring right now. It's the first time in history. There are farms outside of Kodiak, and there's a farm outside of Ketchikan that are both producing kelp. That kelp is going to be sold into a food market that's going to be put into pastas and different products like that. And it's a very exciting time for that. Also, we're talking about oysters and crab, and there's an operation out of Kodiak that is producing
Poor guy.
juvenile king crab. That's all right. So these are the products that we're talking about. There are a number of different operations around the state that I think are growing quickly. And so one of the things that I wanted to emphasize to you as this process goes forward, as the task force makes its recommendations in March of next year, is that in all of these mariculture lease site applications, if they are within the borough, they need to have the support of the borough to go forward. So anybody that makes an application is going to be coming to the borough to talk about their operation and what they contemplate, and hopefully get your support for that. So if you want to think about what can you do to help this process go along, that is one thing. Another thing that is important is to be open to the idea. I envision mariculture, kelp farming or oyster farming or one of these various things as being supplementary to existing seafood operations. And I would encourage anybody that's considering this to utilize your existing infrastructure. Things like you have plants, many of which sit dormant for 7, 8, 9 months a year. You've got existing transportation networks that are already in place that that you can add these species to. Think about it when they started doing gooey duck and sea cucumbers back in the 80s. I was in the industry then. I remember when those fisheries started, and those were new fisheries that were added to the slate of products that these existing processors were already producing. So we've got existing infrastructure. Don't duplicate that if you can. You've got a community cold storage here that's got production facilities. You can hold product, you can freeze product, and there are a number of different products that you can produce using half shell oysters. There's a company, Alaska Kelp Company out of Juneau, that's making kelp-based salsas and pickled kelp and having great success with that. It is really an opportunity to diversify the coastal communities, and as an economic development model, it is the low-hanging fruit. There is not, in my mind, I don't know of another economic development tool that keeps the jobs and the revenue produced from them in the community like mariculture. There really isn't anything else out there. Tourism, I think that's fully developed, and we know that reality. A lot of the extraction-based industries like timber and mining, it is a complicated and multi-year process to get new allocations of timber. It's a difficult process. Here, you just have to go to Juneau to get your site lease granted and start that process. There's an existing structure in place to get to start these farms, and it's at a relatively low cost. So that's the message that I wanted to convey, and I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to come and talk to you. If there are any questions that you have for me, I'm happy to address them.
I just have one, because I remember having this conversation with you at Southeast Conference, and you were saying the startup costs are relatively low. I recall our conversation was that some of the startup costs were pretty high, and I wondered if there were sources of revenue that could help.
Well, let me address that in two parts. One is that there is a loan program, a revolving loan program through the state, where farms can access funds. It's $100,000 per year and $300,000 in the aggregate. That loan program is very favorable because, for example, oysters can take up to 3 years to grow out to market size. So you don't want to be making payments before you start getting revenue. And so it's structured in a way that your payments begin in year 5. So that's a very beneficial process. As far as your infrastructure costs starting up, what is a large cost? Relative to what? Relative to starting a seine operation, it's probably fairly comparable or less. To build the rafts and buy the equipment and do that. But if you're going to do this, I would encourage anybody to do it as a community. I mean, you have through a cooperative format or something like that. Because you got to do things like you got to buy tumblers, you got to buy sizing machines that each individual farm, if it's small in scale, you can't rationalize that kind of capital expenditure on a farm that is 20 acres and is producing maybe 1 million oysters a year. But if you have 20 farms or 10 farms that are combining to buy this infrastructure, now that total revenue supports the use of that. Not everybody has to use it every day. So there's ways, I think, to as a group to develop the scale is necessary to buy to acquire the equipment that make them efficient. I mean, that's like any operation, you've got to be able to produce the product as efficiently as possible.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah. If I was to start a process, what are the major hurdles I have to jump other than what Cindy talked about?
Obviously, financing is one, and you've got to be patient financing because, for oysters, it's a multi-year
I'm familiar
investment.
with that one.
Kelp is a little faster because you plant in September and harvest in August or in April, so it's less. You get a less than a year return on investment. The major bottlenecks, as I see now, are in addition to just the capital, for oysters would be getting your spat. There are Oceans Alaska has some capacity to do that. All of the spat that's brought into the state has to be approved by the state, or it has to be produced in the state. There are 12 licensed hatcheries in the state right now. Most of them are fairly small scale, but my expectation is that the industry will upsize as the need grows. It's going to have to, right? The other part of the Alaska Mariculture Initiative and the task force effort is to utilize the existing model of the Regional Aquaculture Association to produce that basic product, to produce your oyster spat or produce your kelp seed, and to use a model like that. Number one, because we've already used it, we know it works. And we know the way the system works, either through self-assessment or other ways to fund it. You have the technology already in place. That would be my suggestion. Would be use that existing infrastructure and expand that. So seed is number one, and the number two is having sufficient testing facilities. All of the product that goes out on the oyster shellfish side has to be tested. The only testing facility that's approved in the state's in Palmer. So you have to go to Palmer to get it tested. But if you did it, but if there's enough volume, perhaps there's the lab in Sitka that the Sitka tribe started could be upgraded to get certified to certify the product in Southeast, or you could have a lab here locally to do that. Kelp is less of an issue because you don't have PSP issues with kelp. It can go immediately to market.
Any other questions of here?
So when you file for a site The public hearings, probably people don't want it in their backyard, that kind of stuff, so some of those other hurdles like that.
Every site application, first, well, the site, every site application goes to the state. There is a multi-agency application that's already prepared. As part of that process is a public notice requirement where it's published for a period of time in a statewide periodical where there's an opportunity to object. Every state has to take into consideration, every site lease application has to take into consideration other historic uses in the area. It doesn't mean that they will be rejected on that account. You can't put a site, say, in a hatchery release area or a cost recovery area. You can't, there are certain specific restrictions. There are places where you don't want to put it. You don't want to put a site in a harbor where you may get, say, a shellfish site in a harbor where you may get contaminants from the vessels that transit. And that's just, I think that's just.
To follow on
Yes, sir.
Kurt's question, then I would have to have both, for instance, kelp, I would have to have both a state permit and a federal permit in order to be able to do it.
The federal agency review is part of the state application process. It's in the same when you get your site lease from the state. It's already been approved by the feds. There's a process, and you'll see if you go to the website, you'll see there's a whole chain of analysis that in which agency reviews the application at which time.
Any other questions, Mr. Shear? Thanks, Mark. That was
one more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Since we didn't have the PowerPoint, and for people listening at home, could you give them that website, please, in case they want to look at this for themselves?
Sure. Yeah, there are two websites. I would direct you to the Alaska Fishery Development website. There's an Alaska Mariculture Initiative page that has a tremendous amount of information, including financial information. And then there's the Alaska Fish and Game Aquatic Farming site. If you just do Alaska Fish and Game Aquatic Farming in your search, it'll come up. It's got applications and more information than you could possibly want to read.
Thank you.
great, good idea. And Liz probably has that information, I would imagine.
Oh, yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, Liz has all the information that you need and has access to it.
Okay. Great, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Enjoy the sunshine. Yeah, gonna unplug stuff.
Yep.
Put under here. Next time.
I'm a witness. I'm a witness.
So are we ready to proceed?
So I follow over.
Okay, now we're back to visitors' views related to the agenda. Anybody in the audience that wants to speak to views related or that are on the agenda tonight, step forward, state your name, who you represent, please. How many, just for an idea, how many people are going to want to testify tonight? If I get a show of hands. Okay, that's not too many, so we don't have to be too limited on our individual times. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm Gary Morgan, an electrician who works for Petersburg Municipal Power and Light, and I'm representing myself. I want to speak to the Assembly and the public about the recently proposed organizational change which put Power and Light under the management of a utility director. I'd like to state that I'm opposed to this idea, and I'd like to share a few reasons why. An electrical superintendent has traditionally been a position held by an electrical engineer or someone of similar experience and background with training in electrical distribution. I'm told 14 years ago Joe Nelson took over, and before that there were outages every week. Petersburg suffered constantly by these outages. Since then, this utility has undergone changes and improvements that were implemented by an experienced electrical engineer. Weekly outages are a thing of the past, thanks to good leadership. It takes a person trained in the electrical industry to recognize and make these positive changes. This is not a position that someone from a non-electrical background can learn while on the job. It requires technical training. Furthermore, our utility has some very antiquated equipment that needs replacement. Now is the time above all others that we should be led by an electrical engineer. Double E's, as we call them, are qualified to guide our utility through all the necessary upgrades and modernization that's already 20 years overdue. The money's saved and in the bank. We just need the right person with the right qualifications to lead the design. The utilities director idea may save a little money on paper, but in real life you'd lose those savings plus more in consultation fees. It's a lot cheaper to hire an electrical engineer full-time as your superintendent than pay a consulting firm to lead a manager with no electrical experience. Plus, a full-time double E on salary saves the borough money on other departmental costs. Recently, Joe proposed the Borough Finance Police Station project, remove the backup generator from its plans and instead connect to the power and light emergency generation system. This saved the borough several $100,000. These types of cost savings are only realized when you have an electrical engineer working for the borough. The engineering consultants for the remodel project recommended the more expensive option. Joe's plan saved the money plus maintenance and operating costs for countless years into the future. Not only does an in-house double E save money, they also serve as mentors for those working under them. I've relied on Joe and his knowledge countless times in only 2.5 years. When I don't understand something or need help interpreting a problem, I turn to the superintendent. Who do I turn to now for that help? Add some more money to the consultation pool. One of the most important reasons I don't support this organizational change is from a pure safety standpoint. The superintendent is responsible to make sure each trade is doing his or her job safely. The steps and procedures we follow during maintenance and outage events come directly from the superintendent. How would a director of utilities with no background in the electrical industry oversee the safety of those under him? How would an untrained person protect and direct linemen from invisible energy that he knows nothing about? What if the unthinkable happens and one of us were killed in the line of duty? Who's ultimately responsible for the safety of the utility and its workers? The worker with no one to look over his shoulder or audit his safety measures, or the utility director that's in charge of everyone's safety but has no electrical training or background? I know that times are tough for the state and borough. Everyone's looking for ways to save money. Here's what I don't get. The most financially stable and profitable department will no longer have someone qualified to run it, but that unqualified position will be compensated a significant sum more than the current electrical engineer of 14 years. Employees of Power and Light are expected to make up for the lack of an industry experienced manager, but get no additional compensation. The assistant public works manager gets a promotion and raised to take over the management of public works. Public works saves money as it eliminates the assistant public works manager, but Power and Light gets a manager with no industry qualifications. Power and Light has $3 to $4 million in the enterprise fund surplus and could use that money to invest in upgrading its outdated infrastructure. Yet it lacks an electrical engineer with the training and experience to prioritize and direct the monies where they're needed. To put it in perspective, when an owner of a multi-million-dollar fishing vessel hires a skipper with no commercial fishing experience, as long as it had an experienced crew, would that be a good way for a vessel owner to cut costs? Is this good business practice? How long do you think that vessel is going to remain profitable? Please let's table this idea and move towards finding the next Joe Nelson. We're wasting valuable time that could be spent looking for a suitable replacement. I have no doubt there are qualified and eager candidates in Southeast Alaska that would jump at this opportunity.
Thank you, Gary.
Other side.
It's on the other side of the podium there. Okay, next visitor, State
I
your name.
believe everybody got my letter. My name's Nathan Mitkiff. I'm the head electrician at Icicle Seafoods. I'm representing both myself and Icicle Seafoods in this matter. As a head electrician at Icicle Seafoods, which is the largest private consumer of electricity on the island, I have great concerns about the proposed change in management at Petersburg Power and Light. It concerns me that the city will be going from a qualified electrical power and light superintendent with knowledge and education of electrical generation and distribution systems to someone who just has administrative skills. At PFI, Icicle, I have seen as we have lost highly qualified people and replaced them with lesser qualified people, the issues that arise, not replacing qualified employees who know how to design, troubleshoot, and give day-to-day leadership has a very negative effect on the running of the facilities and the morale on the people under them. It often costs much more than anticipated because of having to redo things or having to hire outside contractors to engineer projects and troubleshoot issues that arise. I would ask the council to seriously consider replacing Joe with another qualified power and light superintendent. I think this will prove to be the most cost-effective option in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Anybody else with views related to items on today's agenda?
Hello, I'm Richard Burke. I represent myself and the ATV, or OHV initiative. I listened to the last Borough Assembly meeting, and I heard a lot of people talk about their budgets getting cut. Essential services like the hospital and mental health. My OHV initiative raises revenue that could be used to help support these services. And it does this without hurting local business. Some of the Assembly members are saying they don't see a need for this. They don't see a need to allow people to pay money to ride their ATVs on borough streets. They would rather raise sales tax and tax local businesses to the brink of bankruptcy than to allow for this new source of revenue. Revenue that could be used to fund essential services like the school and the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other visitors in the audience this evening with views related to items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda. Is there anybody with a view unrelated to a topic that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, that takes us to board, commission, and committee reports. There are none slated there. Consent agenda, no items there. Report of other officers. That brings us to the mayor's report. We're still seeking letters of interest. We're seeking letters of interest for one position on the hospital board, 3 vacant seats on the Historic Preservation Commission for different positions there. If anybody's interested, you could submit your application to the borough clerk. You could email it to dthompson@petersburgak.gov or mail it to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or dropped off at the Borough Administration Office at 12 South Nordic Drive. Payment in lieu of taxes. PILT and skill roll schools legislation. The borough recently learned that PILT funding was authorized for fiscal year 2017 and payment should be issued by July 1st, 2017. Finance Director Tao budgeted for $550,000 of PILT revenue in the current 2017 budget. Reauthorization of secure roll schools is looking positive, but it's still in the works. We're having a public hearing for proposed local improvement districts for street paving on Unimac, Vesta, and Pearl F Street. A public hearing regarding the proposed LIDs for street paving on those streets. The Severson subdivision will be held on Wednesday, June 14th, 2017 at 6 p.m. in the Assembly Chambers in this building. If an affected property owner opposes the creation of the LID, a written objection must be submitted to the borough clerk at or before the hearing. For more information, please see the public service announcement attached to this report. And after reading that again, I have a question for the clerk or the manager. Will these people that are going to be in the affected area be sent a mailed notification that this is taking place?
They have been.
Okay, thank you. Possible date change to the June 5th, 2017 Assembly meeting. Got word that Finance Director Tao will be out of town on that date. If the Assembly feels it necessary that Jody's here to answer questions, we could possibly move the meeting to Tuesday, May 30th at noon. Does anybody have any feeling on one way or another on that? Does Jody, would you be available by phone on the 5th of June?
I will probably be at the airport, so it might be a little iffy.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's just a heads up. We could, that we're considering that. We could change it if, after we see how the, the ordinance on the budget goes tonight. Does that make sense?
And talk about it at the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
That sounds fine.
Okay. Excuse me, one other thing. We've sent out manager evaluations. It's supposed to be turned in today. There's a little bit of a leeway there, but I need a member to help me with the manager evaluation conference, and that is supposed to be on the 22nd, the 26th. Last year, Assembly Member Lynn assisted me. If everybody else is all right with that, we could do the same thing, or unless someone else is interested. That's fine. Is that okay? Okay, so we'll keep that date there, Bob. Okay. And then the Assembly addresses the draft evaluation in executive session on the, well, if it's not the June 5th meeting, I guess it'll have to be, if we change that date, we'll change it to the next meeting. And that is all I have. Now it's time for the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Officers Thorson, Rossi, and Tate rescued a burn victim at the Narrows Inn fire on May 5th. Officers Rossi and Tate entered the building and pulled a victim to safety while Officer Thorson ventilated the smoke by breaking a window. Without these efforts, it's likely the victim would not have survived. The victim was transported and his current condition is unknown, but second and third degree burns over a lot of his body. Our first DUI inmate to be housed on home confinement is scheduled to report on, was scheduled to report on May 8th. Senate Bill 91 requires first-time DUI defendants to check in and then be released to serve their sentence at home. Defendants are required to telephone once each day to confirm they are at home as required. The E911 Phase 2 wireless capability testing is scheduled for May 31st. Once this is operational, we will have the ability to access subscriber and location information from 911 calls made by cell phones. We will capture information from North Kupernoff and portions of Frederick Sound to South Mitkoff and Sumner Straits. All 911 calls from cell phones in this coverage area with service will be answered at our dispatch center. We do expect some overlap and will transfer calls outside of our area of operations to the appropriate public safety answering point. Officer Wachter has successfully completed field training. He's taken a few days off, and then Officer Plagans is in the process of moving his wife Jolie and their household goods up to Petersburg. We'd like to welcome Jolie to town. OCS is a new worker in town. Linda Wall was in town from the 7th of May through the 12th. She will be here on a full-time basis beginning in early June and is committed to spend 2 years in Petersburg. So welcome to town. The community center will be closed on this Friday the 19th at 1 p.m. and all day Saturday the 20th for the Little Norway Festival. Public Works crew rebuilt a steep road shoulder on 8th Street thanks to Martin Odegaard, who led that work and supervised the crew. With assistance from the water plant staff, Carl will be developing a fluoride fact sheet that describes the fluoridation system and safeguards that are in place for the operators and the public. With all the discussion about the fluoride, we thought that'd be a worthwhile thing to have available for folks. We're continuing to work with the wastewater staff, or they're working on it, to try to get a plan together to improve our wireless network connection to the treatment plant. We thought we had a solution. It doesn't make any sense, but it was still interfering with the Manor intercom system, even being on the antenna over by the fire hall. So working on that and hope to see if we can get an answer to be able to make sure that they still have network access out there. Wastewater did get word this week that 2 projects scored well in the ADEC loan solicitation and have been placed on the priority list for the department in FY18. They're the Scow Bay Pump Station number 1 replacement project. It's been included in the funding plan for $550,000 loan, and the Pump Station 4 Force Main replacement projects has been approved for a $360,000 loan with principal forgiveness of $72,000. Current rates have been developed to account for the debt retirement on these projects, so no additional rate increases are anticipated. The free annual household hazardous waste collection event is scheduled for the weekend of June 3rd and 4th. The community will be able to deliver unwanted materials such as paint, varnish, shellac, spray cans, herbicides, pesticides, oil, antifreeze, household cleaners, and many other products that should not go in a garbage can or down the drain. There's no charge to residential customers, but there is a 200-pound limit per customer. Commercial customers can plan for disposal directly with the borough's vendor, Carson Dorn of Juneau. Pat Weaver is undertaking a water and sewer extension project into her Bayview Estates subdivision. The work has been designed by a professional engineer, and ADEC has provided approvals to construct the improvements. As the end goal is to dedicate the utilities to the borough at a future date, Ms. Weaver is paying for a borough inspector to keep an eye on the work and verify that the plans and standards of the borough are followed. I believe Marty Susort will be handling that for the borough. So,
any questions of Steve's report? I've got a question. I'm not really in favor of what's Senate Bill 91. I didn't realize that you could go home when you had to come and serve for your first DUI. Is that, Kelly, do you have, all they have to do is call in and they don't have no ankle bracelet, no?
There are some communities that are using electronic monitoring, but we don't have that capability and DOC doesn't plan to put it here. So that was part of the mandate in Senate Bill 91. First-time DUI offenders have to serve their time at a private residence. So that's the deal. They check in and then call us once a day to confirm they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Interesting. All right, thanks. Any other questions? No? Okay. Get back on track here. That brings us to unfinished business. First item on under unfinished business this evening, excuse me, is ordinance 2017-06. This is an ordinance proposing amendments to Chapter 4.28, Sales Tax of the Petersburg Borough Code to increase the sales tax exemption cap for a single sale from $1,200 to $5,000 and to eliminate the exemption for the sale of goods purchased within the borough for use outside the borough, and directing that the proposed code amendments be submitted to the qualified voters of the Petersburg Borough. This is the third and final reading of this ordinance. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Greger to adopt ordinance 2017-06. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have 2 proposed amendments to this, and I'd like to take them one at a time. After the emails that we've received and listening to some of the testimony given, I'd like to propose that, first of all, the first amendment has to do with the $5,000 cap that we wanted to raise it from $1,200 to $5,000. I would propose that we change that $5,000 cap back to $1,500. That's even now $200 less than what the tax committee came up with about 3 years ago, I believe. And so I move that we move the tax cap rather than to $5,000 like is in there back to $1,500. And I believe that change is before you there with Debbie's help. I think we tried to put it into print here. Thank you, Debbie.
Is there a second to that amendment? Nancy, was that a second?
Yes.
Okay, amendment made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Strand. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Jay?
I guess maybe a point of clarification for Member Lynn of what purpose were you hoping to accomplish by going from 5,000 to 1,500? Or what was the goal you were looking at?
The goal I was looking at is that we get a change of approximately $300 difference is all. But at least it is a change from where we are right now. And the difference in taxes is, I believe, if I remember, is about, correct me if I'm wrong, Jody, but is it about $30, the difference?
$18.
$18, okay, is what it would, the difference in the taxes that somebody would have to pay now. And so, listening to everybody, I think it's reasonable, make that change.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just a real quick comment here. I'm glad to see that Bob came down to 1,500 because I would have been opposed to leaving it at 5,000. Seeing how this kind of came out of the blue for the tax committee, when we met with them up at the A&B Hall, where did this come from? So because of the suddenness of it, I'm glad to see that we dropped it to 1,500. So I would be probably more in favor of going to 1,500 than I certainly would have gone to 5,000. So.
Okay, any other discussion, Nancy?
I agree with Kurt. I think 1,500 has a greater chance of passage than 5,000.
Yeah, I agree with that, and we could see what it does for the next fiscal year and see if we need more adjustments. So, any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to lower the tax cap as proposed before from 5,000 to 1,500 passes. And I understand you have another amendment, Bob?
I do. And the second one has to do with the elimination of the sales tax exemption for sales of goods for use outside of the borough. We had a number of folks talk to us about internet sales and sales that are made by people who either call by telephonically in town, and then those products or email, it doesn't matter, but those products then are sent outside of town. The way we have the way the proposition was changed, it would have taxed all those items. The proposed amendment I have here in front of you, and I think you all have a copy of it here, would allow all those sales to go forward without tax. That would take care, after we looked at it, that would take care of a majority of the comments we received, that this was really going to affect business in town. It doesn't take care of all of them, but it takes care of, I would say, probably 70-80% of the comments we received. And so the language you have in front of you then would allow those sales to go tax-free.
Okay, so this is in the form of a motion to add all the text that's in red?
That's correct. That's correct on that proposition.
Okay, maybe we should read that or make it in the form of a motion that states what we're talking about. So it's shall the Petersburg Borough Code, Chapter 4.28, entitled Sales Tax, be amended to, this is in red, limit, and then we'd eliminate the word eliminate, the exemption for sales of goods to be used, this is in red, to be used outside the borough to those ordered either online or by telephone or mail from outside the borough to a buyer who resides or has its principal place of business outside the borough. So those would be taxed. Is that the way I understand it? And a yes vote will limit the exemption only to sales made up to non-resident buyers not physically present in the borough at the time of the sale, placing the order from outside the borough either online or by telephone or mail. So we need a second for this amendment.
I'm confused. You're amending to keep the tax on items that are purchased by someone who's locally, physically here?
If a person would either telephone or call in or send an email, and they come here and purchase it, they're going to pay tax, Nancy. If it's sent out of town by a common carrier, it's not going to be taxed.
Clarification.
Go ahead.
You were correct, Nancy. So basically, if an order is placed on the telephone, by mail, or online, so the non-resident buyer places the order and they are not physically in Petersburg, they will pay no taxes on that order being shipped to them outside of the borough. If a person is here in Petersburg and doesn't live here, doesn't matter whether you're a resident or not, and you buy that product, and even if it's being shipped to you, you will pay sales tax on it because you are here in the borough.
And that is the amendment we're making.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, motion is made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Gregor to amend the, eliminating the sales tax exemption for sales of goods for use outside the borough, as we've just discussed. So is there any more discussion on this amendment? Jay?
And just a quick thought for myself I think I'll be voting for this amendment because I think it's reasonable, and more importantly, I think then I'll be voting for for this on a whole because in the end, in the end, it will be up to the citizens of Petersburg to decide if we want this enacted, not just the 7 of us. So I'll be voting for that today.
Okay. Any other discussion? Cindy?
Just a little housekeeping, that $5,000 on page 1 in the second whereas will need to be changed
Well,
if this
you.
passes.
Thank you, Cindy.
And also, section 4, item B, has 1,500 twice and 1,200 once, and those figures will need to be changed to be consistent.
And I agree with Jay. This is, I'll be in favor of these two amendments. It'll be on the ballot this fall. That's all we're doing is putting it on the ballot for the voters of Petersburg to decide if they want this to move forward. Any other discussion on this second amendment?
And real quick, this is just a continuation of what other communities do, so we're not reinventing the wheel here, so I will also be voting for this.
Okay, will the clerk call the roll on the amendment, second amendment?
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. Okay, the second amendment passes 6-0. Now we will, is there any discussion on the main motion for ordinance to adopt ordinance 2017-06 as amended? Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2017-06 passes unanimously. Those two subjects will be listed on the ballot this fall individually. The next item on the agenda is ordinance 2017-07. This is an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adopting the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. This is the second reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution, or this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on this ordinance?
I would like to make a couple of amendments to this ordinance. I would like to reinstate that $750,000 that we took away from him on the first reading, because he was going to use that money for repairing aging infrastructure. And I'm kind of, or he's going to use that money, excuse me. And anyway, I'm kind of more a proactive guy when it comes to replacing parts and things like that, instead of waiting for crisis management. And Joe has, come up with a long-term maintenance list of what needs to be replaced, in a timely manner. And if we take that $750,000 away from him, I'm not sure how he's going to be able to do that. So, and then that's the First Amendment.
Let's
So we'll
do
just
one
do
at a
that
time,
Okay,
otherwise
let's
it's
do that
going to
one.
get confusing as last time. And Bob, you have?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Is there a second on the amendment?
Right.
Not yet. So your amendment is to reinstate the $750,000 that we took out of power and light budget that was going to be used for the purchase of the building and the parking lot?
Well, no,
Yes,
Joe,
purchase of the building and parking lot.
well, no, there was something else. When I discussed that with you this afternoon, could you explain why you'd like to have that money back that we took away from you?
I think before we go any further on discussion.
I'll second for the sake of
Okay,
discussion.
all right.
Oh,
So,
thanks, Jay.
motion's been made to reinstate the $750,000 that the Assembly removed from Power and Light's budget to purchase the building on Birch Street and build a parking lot, and seconded by Mr. Lynn.
Okay, wait a minute, then, all right, well, let Joe explain. Maybe I misread what he was saying.
I thought that's what I'm understanding.
Okay.
That was my understanding too, when I asked the question.
Okay.
Is that what you were
Can you bail
referring
me out
to?
here, Joe, or did I just
keep
dig
it
myself a
short?
big hole?
The reason I brought it up is because I was receiving mixed signals. I had signals from the Assembly that you wanted to spend our reserve on our infrastructure, aging infrastructure. And so I was asked to put together a long-range capital project schedule, which I did. And over the plan that I put together, that over the next 4 to 5 years, we would spend roughly $4 million on our aging infrastructure. And what this would do would be to reduce our reserve from somewhere between 7 and 8 million down to around 3.5, which is really the basement. That's we don't dare go any lower than that. So it was part of this plan. I put the plan together, and so for year number 1, I put in roughly $1 million as part of that plan. And then, lo and behold, during the budgetary process, where the money was taken out, so that leaves only $250,000 in there. So I was confused as to what your wishes really are. Do you want to spend down that reserve or no? And
Well, any
Just as a point of clarification, if we're talking about a specific line item, that line item we were addressing, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, was regarding the Birch Street lot, as you said. That is the specific thing we were referring to with that money. Is this correct?
I'm
Make sure I've got this.
I think that's the action the Assembly took. There was a, Power Night Superintendent Nelson gave us his list like he's talking about, and the one item that we removed was the parking lot.
Correct.
For $750,000. That's, was the amount, so that's the only correlation I have between the project list. Without having the list in front of me, that's the way I remember it.
So let me ask you this then, if we reinstated it, would you go ahead and do the Birch Street parking lot, or would you use it to replace aging transformers or aging telephone poles or things like that?
little clarification here. You keep talking about a parking lot. I don't have a project that's called a parking lot. I have a project that's called plant improvements. And probably the oldest piece of infrastructure we have on the system is this plant across the street. I don't think there's any question about that. And for the last 20 or 30 years, it's been severely neglected because the plan was to move it out the road. So we did do nothing with it. We just kind of let it be for the last 20 to 30 years. We can't neglect it any longer. So in my professional opinion, of all the infrastructure that we've got, what needs to be done first is this project, which includes additional parking space. But it also includes trying to move things around so that we can alleviate this situation where we have 6 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket, and we can't even drive in and out of our area there without backing into traffic. I can't get in and out of my parking place without backing in and out of traffic on the busiest intersection in town. So there is a definite need there. It is not a glorified parking lot. It is a needed project, and it was well defined as I put it into the budget. And the city manager took a look at it, and he agreed that, yes, this is something that needs to be done. So with that clarification, if the money is put back into the budget without any further direction from the assembly or from my boss, the city manager, then yes, we would move forward with that plant improvement project.
Is there a list of the Power and Light Superintendent's plan changes available to us at short notice? Do you have one, Jody?
Well, she's going to have one more point of clarification.
Right.
Joe, one more point of clarification. As part of that project list, was that purchasing property adjacent to the building over there or to our current property?
That's correct. We
Thank you, sir.
purchased that property where the present owner has to use our parking lot as access to their property.
Thank you, sir.
Not right now, Scott, thanks. Joe, this list that you generated, it starts with item 1 from hydro generator rewind down to item 9, which is plant improvement. Is that in a prioritization? Is that in a prioritized from 1 to 9?
No, that's just how they came to mind. They did not prioritize them. I only did that when I put the budget together.
Okay. Anybody else want to look at this real quick? I guess it's irrelevant.
For instance, the one that you mentioned, the rewind of the hydro,
Yeah.
that's not something we can do immediately.
Okay.
Okay, it would take about a year's planning before we could ever do that, so.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, that's what you pay me for, is to put these things together and set a priority on them and give you my professional opinion. And
So if this list was to be prioritized, would the purchase of that property on Birch Street be number 1? Is that the most important for the infrastructure in the system in Petersburg?
The purchase of that property is key to the project. It wouldn't be much sense moving forward with it unless we had that space to deal with.
Right, but I don't know if that was a full answer to my question. Is that the most important infrastructure project as far as distribution in the borough? For power distribution? Is there...
It's the most important one that we can do on short notice. I wouldn't say it's more important than rewinding the hydro, no, but it's in order to have something in the budget this year, as I was directed to do, that's the one that has a priority.
Okay, any other questions? Jay?
Yeah, sorry, Joe. Maybe this is an obvious question, but I'm assuming the property is for sale then at this point?
Not to my knowledge, but I think the price just went up.
Fair enough. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, any other assembly member discussion on this amendment? And I believe the amendment is to include that 775 or whatever it is for the plant improvement back into the budget. Is there any other discussion on that? Nancy?
I can't support that. If the $750,000 were going to be spent on actually replacing aging infrastructure, I probably could go along with it. But I believe there's going to be an extensive Corps of Engineers permitting process to put gravel in over there. It's not. I don't think it's something that can be done in a year, but I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, and I guess one other point to make is that if this doesn't get reinstated into the budget, it doesn't mean that it can't be put back in the next year's budget, and you can move forward with some of the other infrastructure projects. That's just my opinion, so I don't think I'm going to be voting in favor of the amendment. So with that being said, will the clerk call the roll on the amendment?
Jay?
No.
Bob?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Mark?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Okay, the amendment to add that item back into that plant improvement back into the power and light budget for this fiscal year is, that amendment has failed with a vote of 5-1 with member Walhooter voting in favor of it. And now we're back to
my second amendment.
I'm sure there'll be more. This
Okay.
might be time consuming, so that's why we should do them one at a time.
Okay. I'd like to reinstate the position for the lineman. Because when I talked to Joe today, there's a lot of stuff in the very near future.
Point of clarification, the lineman has never been removed from the budget. Am I correct, Debbie?
That is correct.
Okay.
Oh, it's still in the budget?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then I retract that, rescind that.
We could have.
Thank you.
Forward, but yeah, I just
Okay.
thought I'd clarify
Okay,
that.
as long as it's available there for him, so he can do that.
Okay.
I would encourage getting another lineman.
Okay, sorry, but.
Okay, no, thanks for clarification.
So now we're
Saves us
back
a lot of trouble.
to ordinance 2017-07. It's adopting the budget for fiscal year 2017 and 18. Is there any other amendments, Bob?
I would like to move to reinstate the PILT funds for the city of Kupernof, as we had in fiscal year 17.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Logadakis to reinstate the PILT payment to the city of Kupernoff. We had just received a letter from them. Jody, just for clarification, do you have that dollar amount? Was it? Just so we know what we're.
So in fiscal year 2015, we used the percentage of 0.69% of our PILT funding that we received, because that's approximately what they got every year when they were receiving PILT funds,
Okay.
which is approximately $4,400. And
Okay.
it's been about consistent each year.
So it'll be roughly in that
Yes.
figure. So, okay, any other discussion? Nancy?
Didn't we decide last year that that would be the last year for this?
I don't know. I'd have to, assemblies aren't held by, I don't know what the, accountable for actions of a prior assembly, so this assembly could change that if they wanted to, I believe. Cindy?
I just wanted to add that we have, if we're allowing them to take over management of the harbor, of the dock over there, and they are moving forward with some other acquisition of some funding to improve the dock, that this would help them with some capability in that regard as well.
Okay. And like we discussed earlier in the evening, the PILT money has been authorized for this year. Any other discussion on the amendment?
I just have a question. Has this proposition been approved by the state, allowing Kupernoff to take over responsibility for that dock?
Not to my knowledge. Debbie, have you heard anything?
No,
to that
and,
effect?
and the state can't approve it until we actually change our charter, which will be on the October ballot,
Right, so,
if the voters approve the change.
change the charter to let Kupernoff
To allow
have a
Kupernoff,
harbor
correct.
within our borough. Okay, interesting. Any other discussion on the amendment?
Okay.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, that amendment to reinstate the $4,400 or whatever the figure works out to be to the city of Kupernoff passes on a 4-2 vote with myself and Member Strand in opposition. Back to the main ordinance for adopting the budget for this year. Bob?
I have one more amendment here. I would like to amend that we, rather than to go to 4.4 mills area-wide for education, that we hold it at 4 mills, and that we use $540,000 of the Secure Rural Schools funds to make up the difference, to keep, and use 1.260 million of our property taxes for school.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Discussion. A motion made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Greger to use the numbers he put out, $540,000 from Secure Rural
Right,
School
Secure Rural
balance,
funds.
and then the balance to come out of our general fund to pay for the
Right.
school.
And the reason I believe that is that I think there's a very good chance we're going to get to Secure Rural Schools funds. But even if we don't, we have sufficient money to cover it, one. And two, that the balance we have in there is that I see no reason why we should not be bringing that balance down a little bit and holding that, the mill rate where it is this current year, or the coming year.
Any other comments on the amendment? Nancy?
The budget, the way it is now with 400,000, allows for this SRS funding that we have to last for 9 years. If we increase that amount, it only lasts for 6 3/4 or something. So I think we need to save it as long as possible. They can tell us that SRS has a good chance of passing, but until we actually see it, it hasn't passed.
The problem with raising mill rate, in my mind, is once it goes up, it never goes down. And so I really think we need to stay where it is, not raise it till we need to.
Okay, you had a comment?
Yeah, since you're here this evening, can't quite see you, but I'd like your 2 cents on the matter, if you would, please.
Well, if we left it at 400,000, it would last for over 9 years. And if we increase it to 540, like Nancy said, it will last for only 6 years. We don't know what's going to happen, and we can change it next year. It's your call, it's your decision. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I like the conservative approach, but others might not. So.
Quick follow-up. Why do you like the conservative approach on this one, Jody?
Because I like to save money.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this amendment to make that change? Member Lynn?
One question, just for clarification. Oh, go ahead. Clarification for Bob here is that you wanted to go from the projected 4.4 to just 4 mil?
Yes, same as it was.
So eliminate the 0.4 mil.
Right.
Okay, that's all on this amendment too. Okay.
Steve, you have a comment?
Just an observation. This money is not just used for giving the school operational funds, which is what we're talking about. They've also at times used it to tap in for matches on capital projects. So when we're talking about 6 years versus 9 years and those set dollar amounts, that formula changes if the school has to spend money on a capital project and request that money come out of that fund. So again, just a reminder that it's not just used for, for if they get a grant to redo the kitchen or something like that, they're going to need match money for that, and that generally would come out of this account.
My comment is that just similar to what I made on the radio show, Borough Business today. I mean, I would just as soon lower the mill rate so we're not, increasing property tax to people. And if we get funded for secure rural schools this year, which I know it's not a given, but I'm fairly optimistic from what I've heard, it'll be 7 years and possibly 8 years that this money will last. And like I made the statement I made this afternoon was that's quite a few years to see how things progress, I guess. So if you can't figure something out to adjust your financial situation in 7, I don't know that you're going to be able to in 9 with 1 more year's extension. Hopefully, funding will keep coming from the federal government. So, any other comments? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment.
Cindy?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Jay?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Okay, that amendment fails with a 4-2 vote in the second reading. Now we're back to the main motion, and it's our budget for 2017 to 2018. Is there any other amendments proposed?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. You added in the PILT funding, so that means our budget is going to be in the hole, negative $400 or $4,400. So I was wondering if someone wanted to make an amendment to possibly offset that by using contingency money or another way.
I would move that we take it from the contingency.
And I will second that.
Okay, well, discussion on that motion.
The contingency is $90,000.
Right. Correct. Okay, clerk, call the roll.
Okay, for amendment number 4. Sorry, I'm getting prepared here. All right. Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other amendments to the main motion? I'd like to make a comment. There's a few items on here that I know it was in emails that's been around, just sent out to the assembly. I don't know if it's public knowledge. In this budget, there's a proposed wage increase for all department heads, which is going to amount to $41,000. if I could make a motion, I would probably ask that we didn't do that this year, since we're so close on the budget. Another item in the budget is we're counting on $30,000 of revenue from marijuana tax sales. And if we're going into the contingency to balance a $4,400 deficit, I'm not so sure that money's going to show up. So I just wanted to make those comments, and I will vote for the budget as proposed in the second reading, but I will give it some more thought before the third reading. Any other discussion? If not, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. Ordinance 2017 passes in its second reading. Assuming there might be changes next time, but we won't know that till we get there. Next item is ordinance 2017-08. This is an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the fiscal year 2017 budget for known changes. This is the second reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Gregor, I believe, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt ordinance 2017-08, and these two changes are for changes to the budget in Mountain View Manor. It has to do with the fire alarm, I believe, and the portico foundation repair. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance passes unanimously, and that brings us to new business. And first item under new business is Resolution 2017-10. This is a resolution of the Petersburg Borough setting the millage rates for the fiscal year July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018. Entertain a motion to pass this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Lagodakis and seconded by Member Walhuter to adopt Resolution 2017-10. So, would we need to change the millage rate since we changed it in the ordinance prior? Yeah. So we probably need a motion to match what we did in that ordinance.
It failed.
Oh, it failed, okay.
Yep.
Oh, you're right.
Yep.
Good job.
It did, okay, I thought it passed.
Yep. Nope.
Like, what did I miss?
Good thing you were paying attention.
That's right, I'm just still trying to get that money. Okay, so this is going to set the tax amount area-wide at 4.4 mils. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric? Oh, sorry.
Absent.
Losing it.
Yes, it's and we're still going on. Resolution 2017-11, a resolution to temporarily change assembly meeting times for the 2017 summer months of June, July, August, and September to 12 noon. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
I do want to bring up that this is an item that I consistently receive complaints about is our noon meetings, and that people say they cannot attend because they are at work. So just want to throw that out there.
And I've been opposed. For anybody else before I make my comment? Nancy?
The people that approach me about it like the noon meeting. They say it makes it readily accessible to them.
Okay.
I'll throw my 2 cents in as well, I guess. If I remember correctly, historically speaking, we set that during borough formation so as to include people from outside of Service Area 1 to make it easier to be part of local democracy. If I'm remembering correctly, that's why we chose the noon meeting.
And I will just add to that that consistently there are not people in attendance at our noon meetings.
Not disagreeing with that.
One thing I've noticed over the few years I've been here in this position on the council assembly is that if there's an important topic, there'll be a lot of people in the room. It doesn't matter what time of the day is, but
Right.
I don't agree with the noon meetings, I never have and I agree with Jay's comment that that's the reason we put the noon meetings in, was when we were forming the borough so people could participate, from, if they had to travel from Duncan Canal or Beatrice Pass or wherever. But, so I'm not going to vote in favor of this resolution. I think it doesn't allow the people that have 8 to 5 jobs the opportunity to participate in the meetings if they wanted to, so. Any other discussion?
This one doesn't affect me either way.
Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt,
No.
Mark,
No.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Okay, it fails on a 3-3 vote, so the meetings will be, unless it's brought up again, at noon, and first meeting of the month and the second meeting of the month will be at 6 p.m. Approval of a letter to the state of Alaska requesting enforcement of boat mooring and parking rules at Papke's Landing. So we're seeking authorization to send this letter to the state.
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Lynn to send the letter as it's presented to us to, who is it going to go to? State of Alaska, DNR, and is it going to go to enforcement as well, too? Yeah.
Public safety, yes.
Yeah, public safety, so. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, we'll send the letter. Communications, we're down to the presentation that Mark Shearer gave earlier in the meeting, so we'll skip over that. And the next item is assembly discussion items. Is there, first item there, it's A, recognitions. Is there any recognitions? I'd like to recognize something that the manager brought up earlier on 8th Street, filling in the deep ditch. I thought that was a large improvement. Carl, thanks for having your crew do that. That looked like a hazardous situation to me. That's the only recognition I have. Any others? Move to the next item on the under assembly discussions, and it's a discussion amongst the assembly about the reorganization of the borough management team. I guess I could start off that discussion if it's all right with the assembly. I'm the one that asked to have it as a discussion item. I think it was on May 2nd. We all received an email from the manager talking about his reorganization plans. That's the first I heard of it, and the part that I was mostly concerned with was the creating 2 new positions and filling them without advertising for the jobs. We've advertised for positions for Parks and Rec, the police chief. When Kelly was hired, we went as far as to hire a consulting firm, Firstman, I believe that was their name, that narrowed the search down to 3 candidates. We brought them to town. I thought that was a worthwhile investment on that time, at that time. But like I said, we even went as far as to advertise for Parks and Rec. It's a nice service to have in our town, but I don't think it's as important as the Power and Light department. I would think we would advertise, and unless we change the job descriptions, I'm not sure that the people that the manager wants to put in these places have the credentials. One more note, I asked the clerk, talked to the clerk about this, called our attorney, asked her if we could have this discussion in the executive session, and she didn't think it was appropriate, thought it was kind of a marginal area. I guess we maybe could have, but I personally think it would have been a better atmosphere for this kind of a discussion. So that's my input. Other comments? Cindy?
I have to give you credit, Steve, for trying to come up with some ideas for saving money, and I know that you're working hard to toe the line, and I have great faith in Carl. However, I did a little scouting on the internet looking for the qualifications for Joe's position in other communities, and consistently they say things like electrical engineering degree, 3 to 7 years of experience, being the technical expert and being able to advise staff, being able to help with system mapping. There are things that appear to be of such a specific educational background and experience background that I'm really uncomfortable, even though I appreciate the effort to try and save borough money. I can't say that I support this as a way to do that. So I appreciate that you put that up on it as a discussion item.
Any other comments?
Just to go on record, I'm going to concur with Cindy because I at one time was somewhat persuaded that maybe we did need a good, a manager would be sufficient for this position. But after, I understand what it takes to keep a boat electrical going, and you got to have an extensive knowledge on, electrical issues, I think, to fulfill Joe's job. So I'm going to, if this were to come before me and to reorganize borough management, I would vote against it. I would just as soon see electrical superintendent there with the qualifications for.
Any other discussion, comments? Jay?
I have a question for the manager, if you're up for it. For folks listening at home and for us as well, I guess I'll put it out simply is, given the feedback you've received on this, why do you have faith that Mr. Hagerman can perform those duties?
A lot of years of what he's done for the borough in the 5.5 years or so I've been here. I liken this to a couple of other things that have happened in the borough over the last few years. Recycling, people didn't like change and were very excited about it, and then suddenly it's not a big deal anymore. The issue we're facing is financial in some ways, and the only way we're going to make headway against that is by taking advantage of opportunities that come up, short of closing whole departments down, which I don't think anyone wants. Carl, despite what people, we've heard talks about safety. I can tell you that there are more safety concerns in water, wastewater, and public works than there are in the electrical department. It's not a issue of that they don't have safety issues. They have to follow OSHA rules just like they do in the electrical department. And Carl has proven time and time again.
We'll take a 5-minute break if we're going to get out of line. Let's keep the comments down from the audience, please, unless you're called on. Thank you.
So what we need is, again, I'd love to have Joe stay. But he gets an opportunity to retire, and thanks for his service for the many years he's given us. But what we need is then the opportunity to manage our system. Carl is a great leader, and he will work really well with the staff. I think I've heard this a couple times about folks, trying to talk about not having expertise. Well, I think we're cutting our current staff in Power and Light short. They have a lot of expertise, and they're very, very good at what they do. And that's where the expertise comes from. It's not from the superintendent necessarily. It's from the staff that works there. We currently consult out a big part of our Power and Light technical stuff. That's not a reflection on Joe. That's just because that's the world we live in. We had an electrical engineer on this project. It wasn't Joe. He helped, there's no question. But that was outsourced. Same with the North Harbor, same with pretty much every one of our projects. Hiring a electrical engineer to be on the borough staff is going to be really expensive. And in a perfect world, yeah, you boy, I'd love to have engineers all over the place. We can't afford it, folks. I don't know how to answer that any better than that. I trust Carl implicitly. I think he's proven that to this community over and over again on numerous occasions. And I know he can do this job. If the assembly doesn't want to go that route, that is clearly your right. But I'm going to turn it around and say, then I'm going to need the assembly to tell me what you want me to do. Do you want an electrical engineer? When I heard the mayor talk about earlier, worried about how much we're paying. If you think what I was offering to Carl was high, good luck on electrical engineer. And going forward, what is it that we're trying to do? The marching orders I was given by this group was, we need to find ways to cut. There's an opportunity to do some of that. But again, if we don't want to go that route, you're right.
Thank you, sir.
Bob, did you want to comment, Kurt?
A question for Steve is that some of the letters I've seen and so forth says, well, we don't have the expertise to backstop, things that Joe does. Well, how would you answer that?
Well, I don't believe that, but if that's the case, then we've got folks working in Power and Light who aren't filling their job descriptions. And again, I don't believe that. I mean, I've seen the expertise that these guys have, and they're very capable. I mean, again, I'm definitely not picking on Joe. When's the last time you saw Joe at a work site climbing a pole? I mean, he doesn't do that anymore. I mean, doesn't need to, because he's got really good linemen. He's got a great electrician, and Bob on the generators. Our expertise is inside the department, not necessarily just at the top.
Thank you.
Kurt, you were going to...
One of the things that Joe and I discussed earlier today was that if we changed the wording maybe for the applicant to broaden the field by saying if you had like 7 years or so of field experience or of like kind, that would lower the price from an electrical engineer, considerably. So that might be another direction that we look at, is possibly just changing what we're looking for instead of completely, reorganizing.
Like I said earlier, that's up to the assembly. I mean, I'm going to need direction. If we go a different direction, I'm going to need the assembly to make a decision, the majority of you, to tell me, am I looking for an electrical engineer, because I've heard that tonight, or are we looking for somebody who's been a lineman for 7 years? I mean, I can tell you from a leadership perspective, I want somebody more than just a lineman. It doesn't have nothing to do with their lineman skills, it has to do with their leadership ability. Managing people is a totally different animal than necessarily being a lineman. Sometimes they match together, but we want department heads that can lead their staff, manage their staff, like Joe has done for many years, like Carl has done for many years.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Steve. Some of the things that I was seeing, and I was trying to pick communities of a similar size to Petersburg, so that I wasn't looking at a community that had such a complex system that it was way out of line with what we have. And the skills weren't necessarily to be a lineman, but to be able to identify where problem areas were, to help recommend changes and solutions to a system if problems arose, to be that bump up in expertise and knowledge that would be able to provide some creative solutions that staff might not think about or know about. And also the safety aspect, which I believe Gary mentioned, and that gives me great pause. If we put somebody in who doesn't have certifications and training, and then we do have an incident, where does that leave us? My other concern is if we have some kind of a big emergency, whether it's a landslide or earthquake, and we've got somebody who's got responsibilities across such a broad range of responsibilities, I think we set ourselves up for failure in that regard too. I realize if we say no, then we've just thrown the budget into a tailspin, and we've got to go back and think about how we're going to deal with that as well.
This doesn't affect our annual budget at all, does it?
Oh, it'll come out of
Not in the
the
budget.
reserves, yeah.
No, we haven't changed
No,
the
we
budget
have-
to reflect this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Joe's, yeah.
The other thing that you said that gives me a little bit of pause too is that we're going to be leaning more on existing staff, and if that's the case, then they should be compensated for that additional responsibility, and we haven't addressed that at all. So,
Well, I mean, here's some examples. Wrangell's power and light superintendent is not an electrical engineer. Wrangell doesn't have an electrician. They outsource that. When I was in Texas, we had a power and light division. I had 2 linemen and no superintendent. There's lots of ways to cut and slice this. And that's, for the, health and safety of the department, I guess, in a sense, I'm going to need the assembly to weigh in on this. We don't want to I don't want to keep bringing plans back to you that the majority of you aren't in favor of. So, basically, if the assembly wants to get into the organization side of this, which is you're right, then I'm going to need some more direction. Do you want an electrical engineer or not? What is it that you're going to feel comfortable with? Back to the safety issue, I'll speak for the linemen because I know it fairly well. The training they go through, so if having a superintendent that is different than the one they have today suddenly means they stop following safety rules, then I've got the wrong lineman. And I don't believe that's the case. They know the safety rules better than any of us, and they follow them every day. That has nothing to do with Joe or his leadership. It has to do with the fact that they've been well trained. It comes out of school, and it's reinforced by Joe like it is in every other department, including Carl, in the process that he goes through with safety. So, again, not trying to argue, and I don't want to sound that way, but I've got to have some direction. If the assembly wants to get into this world, then I'm going to need to know you want an electrical engineer, or what is it that is going to make the assembly happy with how we move forward? Because if I'm going to have to recruit, it's a pretty long process. I went out looking today, and there's not a single person in the Northwest currently on the job boards that's out there. Doesn't mean that we can't find somebody when we start running ads, but, again, it's a mix of what does the assembly want plus what I think is needed from a standpoint of the leadership side of it.
Another part of the debate on focusing on the power and light. In the budget this year, we're talking about, it's still in the budget as far as I know that another lineman. There's been a debate where we don't need another lineman. So maybe through the discussion we decide if we do, and if we don't, then we could use that part of that budget when we hire a new Joe, if that's the direction the assembly goes. So there's different ways to look at it. I'm not a manager of people, so but I had enough people discuss this idea with me and I had one person, and well, actually, that was on the call-in show today that was in favor of it, and everybody else was against this restructuring and not having someone with an electrical background, not necessarily an electrical engineer, to lead the department. We got a letter from, you mentioned Power Light Superintendent from Wrangell. We got a letter, all of us got a copy of it, and it's public knowledge, and he approached me. I didn't solicit his input. He heard about it. I don't know how he heard about this taking place, and he was concerned. And one of his concerns was that we're one of 3 communities tied to the electrical grid with Ketchikan and Wrangell, SEPA, the grid, and if something happened, I have full faith in our linemen as well. They're not going to do something intentionally to make, an outage. And I don't know the system well enough to know what they could do from this end to damage it all the way to Ketchikan, but I would think it could possibly happen. So he To summarize, he said that this is a pretty important position you are looking to fill for which there is no substitute for education and or experience. If you cannot find someone with a degree in electrical engineering, in my opinion, you may want to look within the ranks of your existing electrical department for someone that has a working technical knowledge of your system, or advertise such. So that's just, we're communicating, this is just a discussion, so I thought I'd throw his opinion on the radio. So anyway, I guess, is there any other discussion on this item amongst assembly members? So
How do we move forward on this, Mark, if we decide we want to?
I was just going to say we need to probably have some kind of a, I don't know if it'd be, have to give the manager direction that we think is the best way to go. And I know it does take a while to recruit people. I don't know if you come up with I guess, a job description. And how do you do that? I mean, do you do that with discussion from the people that are in the power and light now, or do you, I don't know. But I just didn't feel comfortable with this reorganization.
I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
I think I'd have felt much more comfortable if this was an executive session so that we could discuss other parts of this, facets of this, rather than to have it as a public discussion. And then at the same time, if you want to have some job descriptions, some alternative job descriptions available, to go through them and to argue out the points of, one versus another. If that.
I agree that if this discussion goes any farther, if it's going to hurt anybody's reputation or whatever, it should be an executive session. It should have been an executive session, but I guess maybe I should have pushed the issue. And we had an executive session, but Cindy, were you going to?
The only other thing, and I hesitate to raise it because it puts somebody on the spot, but we haven't asked Carl how he feels about this and how comfortable you are with assuming those responsibilities. And if you don't feel comfortable discussing it at this point, that's perfectly fine.
I guess what I'd like to say is that this plan for reorganization was brought to me by Steve. I really appreciate the amount of faith that he has in my leadership ability. I've done a lot for the borough since I came on, and I feel really good about my efforts for the borough and the city. I am confident that I could do this job, but I don't want to do a job that I don't have the support of the governing body. So if that's the way that this is going, I'll step back. I've got a really good job right now.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? So I guess we can't come up with now's the time to come up with some kind of a plan, how to move forward. Steve?
Yeah. We can provide the assembly a copy of the current job description, and, at a hopefully very soon meeting, the assembly can have a candid discussion on what you want in the job description and what you don't. And that's one way to approach it. And that gives me something to work off of to recruit. Because it includes, we have not always had an electrical engineer here. Joe was hired specifically because of that, because of some projects that the borough had and needed done. Prior to that, Joe, I don't think we ever had an electrical engineer. Okay, prior to Joe. So in the past, that was not. We asked Ketchikan and Wrangell. Wrangell doesn't appear to have ever had an electrical engineer. Ketchikan, currently he's an electrical engineer, but in the past they have not had one. And so there's all sorts of different makeups of this.
Jay?
Well, since it's a discussion, might as well say what I want, and if I had my way, for whatever it's worth, I feel I hear both sides of this pretty clearly, and I freely admit I have a hard time wrestling with it. There's no two ways around it. Like I said, if I had my way, like during the June 5th, if we go with June 5th, like I would like to force the issue and have an executive session and speak freely with more information in terms of job description, things like that. And I know I'm not a lawyer, but I think it clearly falls into that realm of where it'd be justifiable. That'd be my 2 cents. I don't know if anybody else has any feelings on that or not, but.
Yeah, we need to move, have something at the next meeting to keep this discussion going forward, because Joe's retiring the end of June, I believe. So I guess I have one question for Joe about that. Joe, if you left and we didn't have someone in your position, do you think someone in your staff, your department, one of your linemen would be able to run the business of the power and light until we found the person we were seeking?
I'm very comfortable when I go on vacation, sometimes for 3 weeks, that they can run things, and they do. But there are things, excuse me, there are also things that come up during my absence that are just set aside, delayed until I get back. So I think you're into a situation where you're probably going to have a time where they're going to be leaderless in a sense, but I think they'll do just fine. Their overall concern, I'm sure, is what the future is going to be, and getting somebody in there that understands the trade. There was some comments made about safety that, the safety that we have in power and light is not on the same level as other trades. If you make a mistake in line work, it's often your last mistake, and if not, you're probably crippled for life, or people that have been shocked, oftentimes it even changes their personality. So it's a very, very serious thing. I think if you look at OSHA, the chapters and the volume of data in OSHA for electrical work is volumes compared to other trades. It's just inherently a dangerous trade. So there needs to be somebody there. It doesn't have to be an electrical engineer. Steve is right. I was hired with some very specific things in mind because of my background and because I was available, because I was not looking to get rich or get a higher paying job. I was actually looking to kind of semi-retire and slow down. That's what I wanted to do. I had, prior to coming here, I had a staff of over 100 people. So this was definitely a slowdown for me. Really enjoyed what we've done here, because the emphasis was turned away from moving the plant out the road by the subsequent councils and assemblies. I was glad to look into other areas that needed help, and reliability, of course, was one of them, and we've made great strides in that. But safety was also part of it. We had, the first year I was here, we had, I'm getting kind of long-winded. No. At any rate, safety is an overriding issue, and I think probably the big reason why you see a lot of folks here tonight is that exactly. We have always emphasized safety. We emphasize it over anything else. I've always told them in the safety meetings that what I want for you is to be able to work here and retire and have all your fingers and all your toes and both your eyes work. If we don't dwell on safety, well, that's not going to be the case. Early in my career with utility, I'd been working for the utility for about a year and a half, and we had a fatality. And that made a real impression on me. So when they put together a switching order, for instance, and the line crew works with the electrician, works with a mechanic, and we put together a complicated 20 or 30 step switch order, it's given to me to review. And when I review it and sign off on it, that means I'm taking responsibility for not only that it will work, but also for their safety. And if you don't think that doesn't give you pause, times, but it's a very serious thing. Just one quick comment on Wrangell. Wrangell is much simpler in the sense that they don't have a hydro. You'd be amazed at how much it complicates your system when you have a hydro generation on the tail end of it and kind of tail wagging the dog, so to speak. But the other thing is that they have a completely different approach. They have a very small crew that only does O&M. They just do maintenance. Anything of any size, they hire Chatham Electric to do that, and of course that money goes to Juno. The other thing is that they don't do anything hot. If they have change out a transformer or something like that, they just kill the line. And that means that all your neighbors and stuff are out of power while they change out your transformer. We do that hot. We train our people, we buy the type of rubber goods that they need to protect themselves, and we do that hot without taking an outage. And so I don't know that the people here appreciate that there are a lot of things that we do, and we do it hot because we don't want to put you out of power and put you out for significant amounts of time. So it's a different attitude. We, here in Petersburg, we've taken the attitude that we want to keep the work here. We want these high-paying jobs here in Petersburg. We don't want the money going to Juno, to Chatham Electric. We want it here, and we can do the work better, and we can do it quicker than what Chatham can do. A good example is the Frederick Point line. The engineer's estimate for that 3 miles of line out Frederick Point was $300,000. That's some years ago. Our line crew built that line in very short order for $150,000, half the price that they anticipated it to be. So anyway, probably enough said.
Thank you, Joe. Kurt?
This is no slam on you at all, Joe. But you make that job look really easy. So that, anybody thinks that they can take it over. And something that I have learned in my life is that when I don't know something, I don't know what I should know. So, I mean, I would be in favor of moving this forward and putting it out to bid, like you say, because I think it's only right that we put this up, and see if there's any other qualified people available before we just do interdepartmental stuff.
So maybe between now and the next meeting, and that was another discussion we're going to have, are we good with June 5th then?
Best for me.
Okay, me as well. So by June 5th, maybe we could have the manager come up with some options for job descriptions. Joe, can you help with that at all, to find a job description that will fit the department and
Yes,
not
I think
have an electrical engineer?
Right. I think the main thing is that you don't want to rule out an electrical engineer. There might be somebody out there like myself that just wants to come here and fish, but on the other hand, you need to also have the experience deal where if they have the adequate and the correct experience in an electric utility, that they would be considered.
Okay, thank you. So would you be willing to work with Steve? Could you guys work together and come up with some ideas for us, the unknowledgeable electrical-minded people, to
We can do that.
make a good decision? Or give you guidance to fill Joe's position? Okay.
Clerk Thompson, if possible, could you revisit the idea of executive session with Sarah before that time? Because although I think what you guys are talking about is quite valuable, putting their position description, I don't want to put this whole discussion to bed yet either. I'd like to sit on that till the 5th of June. That's my 2 cents at least.
I will definitely speak with the attorney about it again tomorrow.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr.
Any
Mayor,
new topics? Steve?
just want to confirm on the June 5th versus May 30th. So it sounds like Jody will not be available, on the 5th. If there's more changes to the budget that we anticipate, you might want to rethink the May 30th date.
May 30th, my boat's going to be out of the water. I know I'm going to be doing work on it, but I could
Or any
take
other
time
day.
away from that.
Yeah.
Is there 31 days in May?
Yes.
I would like to go
Mr.
sooner.
Mayor, we have not ever had a budget discussion where we have not asked Jody a question. I will just put that out there.
That's true. She's the one that set the budget schedule.
You just approved the mill rate, so you're not changing property taxes.
So I would just as soon go earlier than later. I think we don't have much time if we're going to try to fill this
Let's
position.
do it when Jody's here, let's do it. What would work better for you, the 30th or 31st, or is there another day at the end of?
Neither, of course, but we can make it work.
Be nice if we were all here. So we don't have to set the date now, can we? Well, I guess we should, because it'd be making decisions outside the assembly.
So what is it, a noon or evening meeting?
It's the third meeting in the month. We don't have any resolution for that, so we'll have to draw straws.
Whatever time you guys
It
set up.
doesn't matter to me.
Kelly said the graduation is the 30th at night.
So,
I mean, I don't need to go to that, so I.
no, but that's a good point.
So it should probably be a day meeting if it's the 30th.
It should be a day meeting.
There you go.
That's fine. Can you make it?
I'll find out. Let's just set it and I'll adjust
Okay.
accordingly.
30th at noon work? Okay.
Sounds good.
So you have to be here next time, Jody.
Well.
It'll be nice to have you here. So, any other, I think we've covered everything. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.